Hey everyone, we'll be getting started in just a minute, so just sit tight and we'll be getting started in 2 minutes. Thanks for coming. We'll be getting started in a minute. Thanks for joining us. Hello everyone, welcome to Distance Learning with Common Sense. My name is Sue Thotz and I'm the Senior Program Manager at Common Sense Education. This conversation that we have today will be posted on our Common Sense Ed YouTube channel, along with all the links and all the resources and everything that our guest is going to be sharing today, including all the stuff that we'll be posting in the chat as well. So let's go ahead and get started. I have a guest here today, my friend Tory. Tory Wadlington, would you do us the favor and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for having me here today, first of all. I'm Tory Wadlington, as Sue said. I'm a special education teacher for Marietta Valley Unified School District. It's a bit strange looking at myself as I talk, so I don't know where to put my eyes.
You're looking right straight at us. Yeah, we're all here.
Yeah, that's a little bit, yeah. But yeah, I'm a special education teacher for Marietta Valley Unified School District. I started off working in a behavioral class for students who suffer from emotional trauma and just behavioral disturbances and disorders. And so I kind of fell in love with school that way. And so I've always kind of had the student and their feelings and their comfort and my classroom being a safe space as the forefront of my classroom management. I'm also one of the tech, I guess you could say people. I'm kind of a lead. I'm the webmaster for my school's website, but I also kind of help out in the district when I can. And I'm a part of the equity team for my district and for my site, and also a co-founder of Equity in Action CA that I'm on with Sue here. And so equity, student relations, technology, just all of that is just kind of like what I want to bring into the world of education, and so, yeah. I mean, I'm an HBCU graduate too. I'm excited to say that. Grambling State University.
What is that? Tell us what an HBCU is.
Historically Black college and university. And so,
into that.
Yeah, it was a great experience. It was a culture shock for me. Where I graduated from in high school, it was less than 1% Black in the whole area, not just the high school. So it was going from that to an area that was pretty much all Black, and I loved it. I really learned a lot out there about my culture and more about Black history that I never even knew about before then. So it's like, it was a great experience. And I'm also a husband. So yeah, I don't know what else to say.
No, that is plenty, and that is exactly the kind of experience, knowledge, skill that we brought you in to share with us today. Because I think you have a perspective that I think is very relatable when it comes to classroom teaching, right? Reaching out to your kids and making sure that you're really good at what you do. So that's why I love working with you and bringing you on and having you share all of this good stuff. So,
thank you.
Yeah, tell us. We're here to celebrate Black History Month today and kick off. And I just wanted you to share a little bit about your experience and, what does Black history mean to you? And tell me about how you feel about it.
Okay. Black History Month to me has always been an important month. Growing up, I was involved in the NAACP. My mom was from Mississippi, so she knew a lot of Black history, just lived through a lot. My grandma was an educator during, the civil rights era and during the Watts riots and all that stuff. So my dad had a lot of history to share with me. So I was always bombarded with it growing up. And I was always excited when it came up in school because I was like, oh, maybe I'll get a chance to share this story or hear about this person. And I noticed that year after year, I was hearing about the same, I guess you can call them the Black history top five or whatever. It was always Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, Harriet Tubman, Malcolm X, and Frederick Douglass, or maybe somebody in that realm that we always hear about, which is fine. People need to learn about them. But I thought that maybe in the following year, just like I would move from geometry to algebra, the Black history stories would change in the next year as well to something more in depth and maybe a little bit more intense because I'm older, I can understand it, but it was still the same stuff. So I thought maybe it was like maybe they just don't know, or maybe it's not that much to share, and it wasn't until I got to the HBCU that I learned so much more about my history. And I never wanted to be a teacher. Let me just start off with that. I think it's so funny when people are like, man, you're so gifted. And I'm like, I never even wanted to be a teacher. I hated school. I was a kid that was always getting people in trouble. I was the reason you guys missed the pizza party, probably. It was my fault, more than likely, because I forgot to turn something in. And so I did not like school, but there was reasons I didn't like it. So when I came back from college, I worked as an aide first because I knew people in the district. And that's when I started falling in love and realizing, hey, if I work in school, maybe I can make school fun for everybody else. And maybe I can make sure those Black history stories are being shared the right way. And so this year was very important to me to make sure Black history was taught, in a more appropriate way, especially given the last year, with all the racial tension. And it's just so much happened and people are kind of hungry for that knowledge right now. So early this year, I was like, hey, I'm going to make sure Black History Month is, I don't know who I have to talk to, but I want to make sure we get the right message out there so that it's not just a repeat. After everything they saw last year, we got to do more than just like a word search and watching Martin Luther King's speech, or just a clip of his speech rather, for 5 minutes in class and talking about it, then moving on. So it's just been very important to me that students know, not only like students of color know their history, but that the world knows and acknowledges this history that is a part of our country. And more than just the traumatic stuff, more than just the slavery, more than just, or rather being enslaved, and more than just the civil rights era and all that stuff. There's so much more we've contributed to society and to American history that needs to be acknowledged. And so I figured, I got the platform this year. I seem to kind of be, people are listening to me a little more now. So I was like, I'm gonna make my focus this year be on Black history while people are willing to listen. So yeah, that's kind of what brought me here.
Absolutely. Well, we're all listening to you today. You have a platform, you have a space. Tell us about, what are some of the ways that we can begin? Like if I'm a non-black, being a non-black teacher in a classroom, what are some things that I need to be aware of as I approach this subject and as I approach, my lessons and my students? What are some things that I need to think about? Like, what should I do and what should I not do when it comes to approaching this subject of Black history?
Okay. Well, I mean, for one, you don't have to be scared. I've been getting that question a lot this year. Oh, I'm not a Black teacher, but I really want to get these stories out. Like, what do I do the right way? And so I think you just having your heart in the right place already is a good positive step. You want to do it. I love when we open our equity meetings at my site to everybody, and I always see like a new teacher in there who just was like, what, I was curious. I just wanted to know. I love that. The curiosity is great. And so I would just do the proper research, much like you would research for a lesson plan. If you're teaching on, I don't know, the water cycle, you're going to make sure you do that research and get the right stuff in there and all the UDL strategies and all of that good stuff. So just do your research. And if you don't know, just like you would ask a fellow teacher, like, hey, I can't find information on this part. What could I do? Just ask somebody else. If you know somebody who already knows the history and who has proven to you that they know it, don't be afraid to ask for help. But also don't assume that the person is going to know the history because of their skin color. I've made that mistake myself, when it came to, I forgot, I think we were celebrating indigenous people, and I knew somebody who was an indigenous person who was on campus that day, and I asked a question very ignorantly of me. Now that I look back on it, but I just assumed, and they were like, "Well, I don't know the answer to that either." So it's like, don't put yourself in that position. Don't make it awkward. I don't know where everybody's watching from, but if you're in an area that's not very diverse and you have maybe only one or two Black students in your classroom, like, don't spotlight them. We've been there. I've been there at the end of watching groups in the class, and the whole class looks at me, and I'm just like, and the teacher's just like, you can just take a moment if you want. And I'm like, oh, okay, thank you. And it's just a really awkward thing to do. So it's just kind of like, I don't know. I mean, there's so many resources out there. It's as easy as really just typing it in, you know? Even for myself, I don't know anything. So to prepare for this and prepare for other events I spoke at in the past on Black history, I researched and I learned more and more stuff. I went in there. Unknown Black history facts. Who are some Black scientists I've never heard of? Who are some Black mathematicians? You know, just put it in there and you'll find a huge list. A teacher at our equity meeting, he came in and he was very excited because he had learned about, I just lost his name. I was about to look at my phone on this live thing. But I do know his last name is Latimer. I want to say it's Lewis Latimer. It might be Lewis Latimer. But he helped kind of like make the light bulb what it is today, because Thomas Edison's light bulb couldn't go more than, I think, a few hours or something like that. And he made the first one that lasted a few days. So that's important, you know, just look it up. He just looked it up. He was curious. He had heard something about it and he was eager to share it with his students. That's going to be one more new, you know, historical figure that they learn about this year, just from him being curious. And he's not, you know, a Black teacher. He's just like, you know what, I'm curious. What can I do? So I think it's all in just, you know, letting your curiosity take you to appropriate places and just keeping it appropriate. And just like if you were giving somebody cooking advice and you weren't the best cook, you would always be like, well, that's what works for me, you know, or double check this before I, you know, just kind of have that same approach. Like, if you're not super confident in it, don't just like throw it at the students. Just kind of be like, hey, let's discuss this. That's one thing. You got me going on a tangent now. That's one thing I really wanted to do this year too, was less lectures and more discussion, you know, more like Socratic seminar style. I always did that with my students. We would learn about a historical Black figure, and we did Martin Luther King because they were younger, so they still were learning about him. And we like kind of focused on the assassination of him and like kind of like that last part of his life. And afterwards, instead of having them write about it, we just sat in a circle and talked for like 30 minutes. A bunch of fifth graders just talked for a little bit, got their ideas out. They asked me questions. I couldn't answer all of them, and I told them that. And I said, you know what, I can't answer that, but I'll look it up for you and get an answer for you by tomorrow.
You're all learning together.
Yeah, we're all learning together. So I hope that answers your question.
Absolutely answers my question. I think it's a great way to approach. Like, you don't have to be the authority on everything, right? And in this case, like exploring with your kids, taking a look at, hey, look at this great, you know, interesting piece that I found, right? I know one of the resources that you had shared was related to, you know, just bringing in these resources all the time, right? So, you know, Black History Today was one of the sources that you had shared, and you know, when it comes to something like talking about Lewis Latimer and the light bulb, you know, that's not restricted to just Black History Month, right? That is talking about engineering, that's talking about STEM, it's talking about, you know, every day. And so one of the quotes that you had that I saw that you posted was, you know, Black history isn't a separate history. This is all of our history. This is American history, and we need to understand that it has such an impact on kids and their values and how they view Black people. So this was from Karen Parsons. So you know, who's Karen Parsons? Why'd you post this quote? What does that mean to you?
Karen Parsons, for those who don't know, she played Hillary Banks on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and so she's really a really good activist, and she writes some
smart lady
books, and she's amazing. She really grew up to be amazing, and so. Yeah, I love that quote because I think of Black history, and the reason people don't include it in American history as much is because they focus on the traumatic events, all the bad stuff only. And just like you would have that one family member who's always complaining and always sharing bad news, and you're like, should we invite Aunt Jane to the party? Because I don't want to down her there. I feel like that's kind of like how Black history fits into American history. If you only focus on the bad stuff, nobody's going to want to talk about it. Why would you have wake up and, oh, I'm having a great day. And as soon as you get in class, the teacher's like, so slavery. You're like, oh man, this is going to be a rough period. Versus, so did you know a black man helped, perfect the light bulb? That's going to get your interest. You're going to be engaged in,
Or when it comes to activism and it comes to social justice, like how can you help your kids engage in that? So I know Teaching Tolerance just changed their name to Learning for Justice. And I know those are some of the resources that, of course, that we love at Common Sense, and that, I'm sure many teachers love when it comes to talking specifically about Black history as well.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So I know that when it comes to, some of these strategies that you're using, besides just, introducing these topics and learning together, I know one of the things that you're doing during Black History Month was also, you're sharing with your teachers, you're sharing with your PLN, right? You have others who share with you. We know your friend Nairi, our friend Nairi, she's gathered a whole wakelet of stuff, right? How do you share, and how do you kind of build up momentum and excitement around Black history in your school and in your life?
I'm a little different this year. Last year, I kind of had the mindset of you're going to get this Black history fact, whether you like it or not. I was always at people were kind of like, can I stop getting facts? And I was like, nope. And just kept sending them, which isn't the best, but I was like, no, I want these people, I want them to know. This year, I've approached it more in a way of how you would invite somebody to a celebration. I'm like, man, I'm happy we're here. There was moments last year where honestly, I didn't know if we would make it to this year, let alone being another civil war of somewhat. So I'm like, hey, we're still here. Look at our VP, not to make anything political, but it's like now is the time to talk about Black history, and not only talk about it, but to celebrate it. We are witnessing new historical Black figures, we are being a part of it. And even my district is recognizing me for Black history as one of the educators. And I was like, that's so cool. I feel so honored, And so I approached it with, hey, let's do this. This is exciting right now. Let's keep this momentum going. The kids are hungry for it. I went to a webinar a couple weeks back with the CTA, and there was some high school students talking about how they wanted ethnic studies, a part of their curriculum. And they were of all different, ethnic backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, but they were so hungry for it. They were like, man, we want to learn this. We don't want to limit it to Black History Month. So I noticed it's not so much a teacher thing. I honestly don't care if it's a parent thing. You're not in my classroom. But it's more of like, the students want it. And so we need to put it out there. They're hungry for it right now. And I think I work in elementary, for those of you who don't know, I don't know if I started with that. I think if we focus on building this foundational, knowledge of Black history and even other cultural history, and not making it limited to just a month of the same stories, then we'll start to see more and more equity and diversity and inclusion as the kids get older, because they'll be used, to having that view of life of celebrating different cultures versus, kind of being like, nah, I don't understand that. I don't want to deal with it. It's like, oh, that's what you do. That's amazing. Tell me more about it, So I just kind of wanted to focus on that this year, making it more celebratory, so that people are excited to learn about it.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that we try to do at Common Sense this year was we have a whole set of resources at Wide Open School that celebrate and bring in activities that are going beyond, obviously, your standard 5 that you shared at the beginning, and putting in stuff like we talked about, resources for pre-K through 12th grade, including, I love that Compton Cowboys piece. I love, there was a piece on like heavy metal and, it's just I just loved every piece of it, because you can find something in there for everybody, right? That connects with them as people and their interests about Black history, and making that connection to your students. Mm-hmm. So that's all good stuff. So, we had this question that somebody had written in before our session today, and I don't know if you've kind of already answered this, but when it comes to, predominantly white communities, both faculty and students, and that had not had a consistent culture of celebrating Black history in the past, what's the one thing that you want that you would advise them to do or to keep in mind when it comes to like, how do I even start to bring this into my classroom? Would you suggest like doing that lesson, bringing something in together, starting by sharing with your PLN, like, where is that point or what training do they take? Where do they go? How do you begin? What book are you reading? Give me your hit list.
Okay. I would say start by talking to your PLN, because you may be surprised how many more people have the same mindset as you. And it's a lot easier working with the team than on your own. Even joining my equity team this year, last year, it was only a couple people on it. It really wasn't a team. It was just like 2 admin people. And then this year I was like, hey, I would like to join, and they ended up making a team. I didn't really expect too many people. I don't expect that, the staff at my district are racist or anything like that. That's not why I didn't expect them. But I knew that I was hungry for equity work, so I was eager to join. And I found more teachers that I never talked to in my 6 years of being there who also had the same mindset. And so I'm making new relationships, and I'm networking with other people who have connections to different areas. Like, oh, I've always read this book to my class. It really helps the kindergartners understand what Black history is. So I would say talk to your PLN first, because you'll definitely find some people who are like-minded. And if not, come to Equitarium or something like this, and you'll find like-minded teachers. It wasn't a plug or anything, but
oh, that was a plug.
Come to some equity-centered, virtual conferences, and you'll find people. I found, or rather, Sue and I found me, and that's what led me to kind of helping start the equity team at my site and then being a part of the district level. So I would say if you're in an area that's not really diverse and it's predominantly white, but you still really want to do it, there's somebody else out there. You're not the only one. Just start, building your team, and you can make things work.
Exactly. So you did put a plug in for our Equitarium event, which is coming up at the end of the month, February 26th and 27th. It's a free event. I'm sure Jennifer is posting it in the chat, but we have an event that us as teachers we just gathered together, right? We are educators who care about the equity, and we care about the culture that we're building within our professional learning. And we're just putting on an event, and, just have some workshops here that we, are just kind of putting together, and trying to put together quality workshops for us who care about these issues, and wanted to also share this with others. So that's an example of something that we're doing here. And it's in Southern California, right? Tori and I are both in Southern California, but there are people who care about this, and it's more fun to do it together. How about that?
It is. Teamwork makes the dream work. I love that. It's so corny, but I love it.
Absolutely. So I do love this question that we just got that came in. What do you do if you make a mistake that offends somebody, right? Do you stop the work? Oh, is this question from Nivy Clark? Seriously?
She always tries to sneak in there like a stranger. But we'll treat her like a stranger today.
Okay,
that's a good question.
That is a great question. How do you handle that situation if somebody says something that's offensive?
I mean, I guess it depends on what you said. I'm going to assume that your heart was in the right place with the lesson, and maybe you just didn't know that what you were going to say was going to be offensive. After that, I would maybe after class pull that student or maybe staff after a meeting to the side and just kind of be like, hey, can you please educate me on why it offended you and how I can prevent this from happening in the future? It's just as simple as I don't know. Don't be afraid to ask. I don't know. It's weird because an example, I guess, would be better, because it depends on how offensive it was. But I would maybe also get admin involved as well too, if it's with a staff member or.
Yeah, who knows? I know. I know. We had a conversation earlier this week with one of our colleagues, and she was saying how on her staff, she's one of the only Black folks on her staff, and a lot of her non-Black colleagues were saying how they're so fearful of doing this work because they don't want to be offensive to somebody. They don't want to say the wrong thing, and it's this fear that is very paralyzing to them, and they just want to stick to the curriculum. They don't want to bring in this outside content. They don't want to be offensive. And they don't want anybody to think they're racist, right? I think is the biggest part. So, how do you encourage people to, not just let it all out and risk being offensive, but at the same time, where do you go with that fear? I know I had that fear, right? For a long time, I was afraid of saying something that I was going to say the wrong thing, or sticking my foot in my mouth, because I stick my foot in my mouth a lot, right? I talk a lot. And so how do you advise people when it comes to just overcoming that fear and becoming engaged and pushing yourself out there a little bit to become involved?
It's going to be some trial and error for sure. I mean, even for me, when I first started, I mean, things are going well for me right now, and I'm very grateful for that. But when I first started, I was like saying stuff that made like zero sense. I'd be making my presentation like, "Well, I'm gonna kill him with this one." Then I say it, they're like, "What?" And I'm like, just kidding." So you're gonna mess up, and you may say stuff that may offend somebody. I wasn't really making myself as inclusive. I was so focused on just special education students that I forgot about, or at least the student that population I worked with. I forgot about other students with the visually impaired students, deaf or hard of hearing students, and I wasn't making things inclusive for them, and I would offend some people, and I would say, hey, I apologize. I just wasn't thinking about that, but please tell me, please tell me how I can do it now moving forward. So I would say just try it. If it's something real crazy, if it involves a costume, don't just go out there and try it. Run that by somebody first. Like something that involves a bunch of stuff like that where you may, because I mean, I've seen some teachers, dress up as Native Americans. They have the feathered, I don't know if it's a feathered hat for the crown, the headband. And I'm sure their heart was in the right place, but also it's like, don't do that. Don't do stuff like that. So just run it by somebody you trust, I would say. And just also don't be afraid to fail. Just learn from it. Say, okay, well,
and be open. It sounds like you were very open to that feedback, and you were openly open, right? Like, please tell me, right? Give me that feedback and be accepting of that feedback as well. We have a question here that I think is great, and it's really about how do you approach teaching Black History or Black History Month with no Black students in your school, right? Do you do the same thing? What would you do?
That is a very good question. Wow, with no Black students.
Is it important? Is it important?
It's very important. Yeah, it's super important. It's kind of like I told this to you a few weeks back. We were talking, and it was something I used to be ashamed of. I've since then grown from it, but even like a few years ago, I would still be surprised to see like a Black doctor or a Black surgeon or something like that. I'd be like, oh, that's the surgeon, which is bad. I'll be honest, it's really bad to kind of think that, because I didn't think that when I saw a white surgeon or an Asian surgeon. But it's only because I didn't see many Black surgeons growing up. I didn't get to talk about them. I didn't see all the Black scientists or educators or philosophers or anything. I was only taught about the everything but that. And so I think that's why it's important, so that as they kind of keep acclimating into society as students into adults, that when they see a person of color, preferably a Black person, doing something professional, they're not taken aback. It's already common knowledge to them. It's not like, oh, what, a Black lawyer? I don't know about that. It's like, oh yeah, just like so-and-so, you kind of make that connection immediately. So I think it is important to really celebrate. I think it's actually maybe even more so important, because in the future, if that school, let's just say that school has a history of not having Black students for years, and then they start getting Black students, you want to make sure that those kids are already going to be welcoming. That campus is already going to be welcoming to those Black students, and they're not going to be treated like, some type of foreign object or something. Like, what is this? I heard they were slaves. I heard they're thugs, and that's all you know about it. It's like, oh, cool. Oh, your dad's a scientist? That's really cool. I didn't know that. So yeah, I think it's very important to teach it the same way. You may not get the same reactions, and you may get pushback possibly from parents, but I don't care about pushback. So just, I'm like, whatever. So that's a good question.
Certainly bringing in that exposure, and
bringing in that exposure.
Making it part of every day, making it part of your content, your curriculum, and intentionally seeking out those, Black history examples as part of your content and your curriculum. So we're almost out of time, Tory. So thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today, for sharing your experience, for sharing your resources. And I am so grateful to you. And, some of the major things that I heard you say today in those takeaways related to, just being open, increasing exposure, to Black history within your everyday classroom. Black history is for everyone. It's not just for your Black students or your Black teachers. I heard you say, reaching out to your PLN and finding like-minded folks. And of course, be open to criticism, to feedback, and to genuine change in your life. So That's all. That's what I got out of you today, plus a million other things. So thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you, everybody, for joining us for Common Sense Distance Learning. We will be posting this information and the recording of this session, and you can look back and see all the other ones that we've done so far on our YouTube channel. Special thanks to all of our friends who joined us today, and we will see you again next month. Thanks.